Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to welcome my guests for today. I have Diane Helbig, who is Chief Improvement Catalyzer at Helbig Enterprises, providing guidance and training to business owners and leaders around the world. Brian Kelly is President and Human Connection Officer at Brian Kelly Leadership Coaching, helping inclusive, people-first leaders and their teams grow their leadership effectiveness, relationships, and business performance. And Mark O'Brien is founder and principal of O'Brien Communications Group, helping companies and add innovation to their mindsets and their operations to create discernible competitive advantage. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And here is the scenario we'll be discussing. Recently, Republican New York Congressman George Santos was indicted on 13 federal criminal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and making false statements to the House. He may be better known for the many lies he allegedly told about his record leading into his successful election bid. Prior to his indictment, Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia introduced a resolution to expel him from Congress. Speaker Kevin McCarthy blocked the resolution, insisting that the Department of Justice investigation should precede any action. But Congressman Garcia subsequently renewed his resolution. Speaker McCarthy referred the case to the House Ethics Committee. Without getting into the specifics of this case, should due process and the presumption of innocence apply to ethics violations the same way they do to legal violations? It's distressingly common for individuals to defend unethical behavior by claiming it's not illegal. Since ethics demands more from us than strict observance of the law, should we be able to bypass due process in the enforcement of ethical misconduct? And if we do, how can we ensure that unethical players will not exploit ethics rules to target opponents out of political motives rather than the preservation of ethical standards? The floor is open.
If I were a better legal scholar and a better constitutional scholar, I would know, but I don't, whether criminal indictments constitute a violation of a representative's oath.
You know, so I think that's a difficult topic because I remember when, I mean, this has happened over time, right? Periodically over time. George Santos isn't the first, but they've even had members of Congress who have cheated on their taxes, right? Or haven't paid them, whatever. And, you know, they never went before the ethics committee. They were never sent for the, so I have a feeling that I feel like it's, you know it when you see it, whether it's ethical behavior or not. But it's just like most things with the Constitution, it's not really written in there clearly enough for people to be able to have a bright line.
You know, the whole design of the Constitution is one in which the framers did not set out to create a legal system.
Yeah.
They set out to create a legal framework. And, you know, the famous line by Benjamin Franklin that he may or may not have actually said when asked, what did you accomplish, was a constitution, madam, if you can keep it. And that requires a commitment to the integrity of the system that may transcend the letter of the law. Brian, you look like you had something to say there.
I was just going to say, in terms of ethics, it's difficult, right? So we see something, and Diane was getting to this, that we may say, oh, that feels like it's unethical, right? And so while we have a legal system for legal violations that can kind of govern that process, who's going to own the governance of ethics, right? And it seems to be, if you're going to talk about politics, it's going to be contextual, right? It's going to be different, maybe in education or somewhere else. And so I think it's an interesting question. And the legal system's already backlogged. Do we need more of that by throwing ethics into the mix to make it even more difficult to get the things that actually need to be adjudicated through the system?
Right. But we do have, so the question about due process, my initial reaction to all of this was, there are things that have been proven that he did that are unethical. He lied to constituents, took money, those things are pretty. But the question about due process is interesting because there is a process for when you think one of your fellow members of Congress has done something unethical, and it is to send it to the ethics committee. Like, they do have a process to follow. And I feel like Garcia got ahead of it. So it was easy for Kevin McCarthy to say, we got to wait and see what actually happens here, even though it seemed obvious. So I think if Garcia had waited, it might have been a different story. But I'm not sure they all know what their processes are.
Well, that's a really good point, Diane. And I was just saying, as you were saying, that, and I was having trouble understanding from the news reporting as well. It seems like there were two tracks. There was a House Judicial Committee, which was looking into legality, and there's a House Ethics Committee that's looking into ethics. And there seemed to be some conflict between the two, even though they really should be addressing completely, well, not completely different, but separate points. And this sort of ambiguity between them has kind of created a place where nothing's happening with the alacrity that it should.
So given the fact that there are at least two congressional committees that could be involved here, where does that leave the criminal court, the federal criminal court in which he was indicted? And I also have to wonder two things. One, wouldn't the truly ethical thing to do be George Santos to resign? I mean, how the guy could show up and do whatever he does every day, I have no idea. And then the other question, of course, is who sits on the ethics committee? That would be fun. Wow.
Yeah, I'd love to segue into the United Nations, but I'm not going to.
I just thinking of the same thing. But this is, when we talk about ethics, I think we have a huge problem in this country. And I think part of the reason why this is such a difficult topic is because no one wants to hold anybody accountable for unethical behavior, because they know they're going to be held accountable for unethical behavior instead of everybody just behaving ethically. They don't.
What a concept.
And it's interesting, we're focusing on this particular case, but what came up for me as I was thinking about this topic is the ethics around bad parenting, right? We might know it when we see it, but who's going to, administer that? And again, for fear of retribution, that you're going to get sued, and then it's just going to cause more turmoil in the system. I think context matters, but you're right. The ethics, just globally, as human beings, in this case, the person that was committing all these crimes, the congressperson, does he really care about ethics? Right? So
No.
the ethical thing to do would be to step down.
No,
His
apparently
relationship with ethics is, let's say, compromised.
You wouldn't have anything to step down from if you were ethical.
Right. So where does he go from there, given that it's really not that important to him? And is the committee, who makes up the committee, is a great question, right? So is it, again, a partisan thing? Is it who makes up these committees is actually part of the problem, I think.
Well, I think depending on what happens in the criminal court, Brian, I think the answer to your question, where does he go from here, might be to jail. I mean, just looking at some of the counts, I mean, wire fraud is a pretty heavy felony.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the charges that Elizabeth Holmes got whacked with. So
Releasing
maybe,
jail would be the next step, Mark. That's true. Yeah. But
Yeah.
in terms of if he were to be repentant and at all, where would he go in that case, right?
yeah, I understood. It's also interesting to think about whether the criminal court will proceed with this case before any congressional hearings could be concluded. I don't know if you've been watching any of the recent hearings, but they're interminable. They just keep on going. It's just unbelievable.
Well,
And
this
here's
is
another,
part of the
sorry, this is
problem.
a tangent, but here's one thing I can't figure out. Why do they only give particular Congress people 5 minutes for questioning when there's going to be multiple rounds anyway? I don't get that.
Boy, that's a great question, because they're afraid they're not going to get them all in. And then one side will call foul. I mean, let's be honest. Speaking of ethics, the whole system is sort of, I mean, there's a way to play that's ethical. And then there's what we witness every day and have been witnessing for easily 20 years.
Mhm.
So, and it gets worse and worse and worse. This is part of the problem with, in my opinion, with allowing unethical behavior from people, like not wanting to poke the bear kind of thing, not wanting to be the one who speaks up, because all you're doing is saying, that's okay, you're condoning it. And then someone does a bigger thing. And then there's the, yeah, but when they do the, what about so-and-so? And so now everyone's doing this
Mhm.
and they're all guilty. So
Yeah.
where's the airplane? Sorry,
been
it's a
banging this
reference
drum
to a
for-
book.
Yeah, I've been banging this drum for a long time. The problem with compliance is that you're trying essentially to legislate ethics. And what that does is it takes it out of the moral sphere. As I don't have to make judgments, I don't have to make evaluations. If I'm in compliance, then by definition, I'm ethical. And that is not necessarily true, and often not true. You may remember a certain president who we all famously recall his concern about the definition of is what it is.
That was
And
rich.
there is you may remember the senator from Connecticut, Joe Lieberman,
Mhm.
who from Clinton's own party, who stood up in Congress and spoke out and called for his censure. And I heard him talking about it. And this is like an incredible act of courage. His wife didn't want him to do it, his colleagues didn't want him to do it. And his wife said, well, I understand someone has to do it, but why does that have to be you? And and it was simply a statement that our president has not lived up to the standards that we think he should. Why should that be so difficult? And probably we can't find another example of it since then.
What?
Because everything is so tribalized.
Right.
You can't take a stand, if you're
Institutional entrenchment.
yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that the same president who said, I did not debate semantics with that woman, Miss Lewinsky? I think that was him.
I'm pretty sure that was, well, but do you remember when Charles Barkley said, I am not a role model?
Yes.
You guys remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And to the outrage of parents like me who were raising young people saying, well, yeah, you are. Like, you may not want to be a role model. That's one thing, but you are. And it's so crazy to me because these people are in leadership positions and you do swear, you hold up your hand and you swear to all sorts of things that you're going to do, and then you don't do them. And no one holds you accountable. That for me is really the problem, is that we have lost the ability to hold people accountable. I guess because we're afraid of whatever the fallout will be. I don't know. Sometimes you have to stand on a hill and they're not doing it.
I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, Diane, that people in positions to hold other people accountable are not doing it because they've essentially created a circular firing squad. And as soon as somebody starts shooting and they all start shooting, they're all going to fall.
And they've all decided that their needs are more important than the needs of their position. You
Well,
know,
yeah.
it-
And
it's-
votes are more important too.
Exactly. So I'm going to, yeah, okay. Boy, I mean, I could go down a whole, what happened to representative government? Come
Amen.
on.
Makes me
Speaking
curious
of-
about the definition of due process, right? And so it's doing things the way we've always done them, right? And so the idea of having courage to step out like Lieberman did, it's not valued, right? And if you're not in the majority, does it even get heard?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Actually,
Right.
I remember when Liz Cheney was
Oof.
so outspoken against Trump. And, and she paid for it. And she knew she was going to pay for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard her detractors attribute all types of motives to her. But, on the surface, what I saw is someone who felt that the head of her party was not representative of the values of her party and felt that she had a moral responsibility to speak up about it. Now, you
And
can
she
agree or
still
you can
does.
disagree with her position,
Mhm.
but I think you have to give her a certain amount of credit for standing up and then taking the consequences.
Yeah.
Isn't it a shame that we can count on one hand how many people in the past, I don't know how many years, have done that?
Mhm.
Leaders?
But let's go back to Lieberman for a minute. Lieberman was forced out of his own party. He was so popular that he was able to win as an independent.
Mhm.
But that's really rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so was Liz Cheney. I mean, her state censured her. They took her leadership position away from her. They punished her for holding the moral high ground.
Yeah. Well, you and I, Diane, were talking beforehand about topics we would like to address and are not always willing to, not because we're afraid of talking about them, but because we don't believe there's going to be a benefit raising the conversation in an environment where so many people cannot see two sides of an issue with any kind of objectivity. And that if we take on a topic, we immediately will discredit ourselves with people we might be able to reach on other topics. So that self-censoring is not out of fear. It's out of a calculation. How can we have the best possible benefit? Well, once you start thinking that way,
Yeah.
then it starts saying, well, how can I censure this guy in my party? Because then we're going to have a slimmer margin, and then the other party is going to take control. And of course, we have the moral high ground because we're ideologically pure. You start making more and more of those compromises.
Right.
And eventually you're just right down in the swamp with everybody else.
But then everything's a compromise. Look at Dianne Feinstein. She should resign.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it, including her. She's 80, not forget about the health. She's 80. Seriously? There's no reason other than her own, because she wants to stay. And there are people who are, saying this gal's got to go, right?
Yeah.
But then there's the leadership saying, sure, if she wants to stay, she can stay, because they need her in the numbers.
Right.
Is that ethical?
If
She
you
dies
sharp as
on the
a tack,
Senate
and
floor. I mean,
some 90-year-olds are sharp.
yeah, I know. She's not one of them.
Yeah. She's not one of them. I don't know. And I don't even remember where I read it, but within the past few days, I read something about the fact that she was being interviewed by someone who was asking her about her absence from Congress. And she said, I wasn't absent. I mean, you're exactly right, Diane. And so, I thought about that when you were talking about they need her because they need her in the numbers. How can they be sure she's going to do what they think she's going to do?
That's a great question. That's a great question, because they want her to, because, you know, look how much she's been such a great public servant. Yeah, absolutely. No question. She's done a heck of a lot. And, you know, I was listening to so LeBron James, so they, you know, the Lakers lose, and then they're all talking about, do you think he'll play next year? Do you think he'll do this? And that what the commentators were saying is, go out on a high note, like Jim Brown did. Like, when you're at the top of your game, leave. Because otherwise it's tragic when you go. So she, whatever, you know.
Well, actually, I would say a prime example of that, Diane, is Muhammad Ali. And I know we're getting off track here, but
Yeah.
after
Sorry.
he fought a guy named Ernie Shavers, who he won, his personal physician, Dr. Ferdy Pacheco, said, I've seen all of his neurological tests. If he doesn't hang him up now, I'm going. And he didn't. So Pacheco quit. But I want to come back to the topic in a little bigger picture, because you know, one of the things I believe I see is a continuing trend of disunity.
Mhm.
And as that continues, notions that we used to share acknowledgement of being right and wrong were much more solidified. And now, Diane, you said compromise, and Jonason, you said benefit. So now, because we don't have these shared values to the extent we used to, we have to think about that. Oh, and the other word you used, Jonason, that just freaks me out is calculation. Right and wrong, that's out the window. I got to calculate. Wow. That's chilling.
It's chilling.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a tension between idealism and pragmatism. And I could give you a whole rabbinic sermon on the topic, which I'm not going to, but it's that tension is deeply rooted in the Jewish legal tradition. There were two schools of thought that debated ferociously, and one favored idealism over pragmatism, and the other favored pragmatism over idealism. You could even think of them in some sense as the conservatives and the liberals of the ancient world, but there was always a civil debate. There was always mutual respect. There is always an understanding that truth has many facets, and that we can't see all of it at one time. And we need to engage people who are coming from a different point of view so that we can become more aware and more sensitive to the different perspectives. And between or among all of us, we get closer to something that really is representative of the truth. And with the polarization, the partisanship, the tribalization, and there must be a couple of more good adjectives there, none of that's happening. And so the sides mutate into caricatures of themselves. And then we have this feeling like, well, is there any choice but blow up the whole system and start over again? Which usually
Where's
doesn't.
the airplane? That's all I'm saying. It's a Tom Clancy book about the plane that flies into the Capitol when everyone is there except one person and kills everyone. They have to start over.
And if you can get Jack Ryan to be the one person, then
I
we're
know,
safe.
right? Then we'll be saved.
I would have gone with Rambo, but whatever.
Oh, yeah, you know.
I have a comment. I never usually don't have the presence of mind to look at the comments. It's from Annette, who was a guest recently. Diane was saying that people in leadership roles are only looking out for themselves. Only being focused on yourself is easier. Being group focused is harder, but that is our leader's job. Tribalization is easier too. It's easier in the sense that I think what Annette means is that we don't have to think as much.
Right.
We don't have to get down into that gray area and start grappling with it. Just make it black and white, binary decisions, Keep it
But
simple,
nothing-
sweetheart, and
Yeah, but nothing is binary. That's part of the problem. They want it to be. And they're all behaving badly, but pointing at each other and saying it's ludicrous. I do think, however, and maybe this is me being an optimistic rebel, Brian, I think that the millennials and the Gen Zs, when they are in, control, none of this will be going on, because I really feel like this is a boomer problem. I mean, I get it. George Santos is young. I don't know what he is. Maybe he's a Gen X, but those millennials and Gen Zs, they have like none of this. They don't have the bias. They don't have the hatred. They don't have the tribalism. They grew up in a global economy, with social, with the internet. So I just feel like they're different and they're more communal. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I hope you're
Love the
right.
optimism.
And the question, one of the questions that Annette asked prompts another one for me, which is, shouldn't our elected officials be constituent focused? I mean, whenever I watch hearings, I think, hold on a minute. Are the people that this dude represents happy with his conduct, with his opinions, with what he's doing and saying? Ooh, sometimes that feels like a stretch.
Yeah, but that's not really, so the people who elected him probably are, but when you get elected in any of those high, you are then the representative of everybody in your constituency, the ones who agree with you and the ones who don't. And you're supposed to make decisions based on what the people want. And no one's doing that right now.
That's
and
what I
they
mean.
have not been doing it.
yeah,
So-
but part of the problem there is that just to follow up both your points, that the way the system's designed, we aren't supposed to be voting for people who will do what we want them to.
Right.
We're supposed to be voting for people that we trust to do what's in the best interest of the country or the society.
Mm.
That's what a democratic republic is. And that's gotten lost, really
Yeah,
lost.
Yeah.
It's a great point, Jonas, and in terms of, I mean, we've got the two-party system. It's hundreds of years the system's been built and become what it is. But how many people have confidence that when they make their vote, that the person that they're electing is going to do what's right for Americans? And the point about the two-party system that's just seems to be entrenched is protectionism. Get me into my seat, and then what do I need to do to hold on to it? And the issues become politics. Which side do I have to play on this time to get what I need to stay in my seat, instead of, as you said, the constituency focused objective, Mark. And it's like, that's what we'd like to see. That's the utopian. That's maybe how the democratic republic was intended, but it's been bastardized for 200 years, and it's going to be difficult to course correct that given the way things are now.
Yeah, I mean,
isn't
I have
that
friends who
unethical?
are, go ahead, Diane.
I'm sorry. This feels unethical to me. You take the job, you read the job description, it's clear, it's been clear for 200 years, and then you get the job and you don't do anything that's in the job. Isn't that unethical?
I mean, if you listen to, Tulsi Gabbard was talking about her first introduction to being in Congress. And she said they have a big get together, everybody, it's all kumbaya, we're all friends, we're all here for the best interest of the American people. And then they separate into their parties. And she said they are told explicitly, you don't vote for bills proposed by the other party, even if you like it.
There you go.
And she said she was told this
Yeah.
as a freshman congressman.
Oh yeah,
Of course.
it's been that way for years.
Yeah. But it didn't used to be that way.
No,
I mean,
no.
I'm not sure how far back we're looking.
Well,
when Tip O'Neill was Speaker of the House,
Hmm.
and they would battle it out, but they respected each other, and they would come to, on a lot of things, they would compromise. That's what it's all about. No one's going to get Look at what they're doing right now with the debt ceiling. Talk about unethical. To hold hostage when they know they're going to do it, they have to do it. It's in the Constitution that it's got to be done, and they're sitting on this thing, and Kevin McCarthy's not going to be able to get his party to vote on any sort of compromise because they've already told him they're not going to.
You know what he went through just to get the speakership.
Just to be speaker.
Yeah, right.
They couldn't rally around anybody because the party is so fractured. I recently read, been actually listening to the biography of Alexander Hamilton, and it's absolutely fascinating that Hamilton and Jefferson despised each other, ideologically and personally.
Wow.
And they were both in Washington's government, and they had such radically different views that they could barely be in the same room with each other. And yet, when Washington's first term was coming to an end, and he didn't want to be president the first time, he didn't want to be president the second time, wanted nothing to do with it. And they came to him and they said, you have to run because you're the only person who can keep the country together.
Wow.
And that's what's different, because you
Totally.
would never have that now.
No.
They still had a vision that the best interest of the country comes before everything else.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder how many of the people who swear to uphold the Constitution have read it?
I wonder it all the time, and I'd say too.
Yeah.
I'm happy I don't know, because it would terrify me, but
It would terrify you. You can tell that they don't know by the things that they say out loud,
yeah.
that they've never read it, or if they read it, they didn't understand it. And so they just moved on, because the stuff they say is
I
so
completely agree.
Yeah. It's
Got to file that one under sad but true.
Yeah.
The Goldson Plan for National Peace and Prosperity calls for relatively moderate members of both parties to quietly form a coalition among themselves.
Yeah.
And you've had this occasionally, like the Gang of 14 or the Gang of whatever, who were able to form a big enough block that they could actually influence certain legislation. And it was very narrow. But I really believe that there are enough reasonable people on both sides that they can create some sort of a bipartisan coalition if there's the will and the courage to do so.
Courage.
I used to be against term limits. I think they may be the salvation of the country.
I agree. I totally agree with you. I feel the
On
same
one
way.
hand, you don't want to lose people with experience, but it just isn't working.
You have to.
Do you know, are we all aware of the fact that there is a website, termlimits.com, and you can go sign a petition?
Oh,
That's good to
no.
know.
Yeah.
Termlimits.com.
Wow. Thanks.
All my hundreds of thousands of listeners, please go to termlimits.com and take a serious look over there.
And apparently they're
cool.
making headway.
I'll
Good.
share that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something's got to give. And what I always say is it's our responsibility, right? We elected them. They're supposed to be representing us. It's up to us to fight, stand up, scream it from the rafters, whatever it is that we're done. It's a courage thing, I guess. And it too many people don't believe that there's anything that can be done. So they do nothing.
Yeah. There's an organization called Braver Angels, and I participated in one of their functions. They got together left-leaning moderates and right-leaning moderates, and they had us do a series of exercises, part of which was our perceptions of the other side. And it was really quite enlightening how much more we have in common than divides us.
Yeah.
And you know, the noise from social media and the entrenched power creates this sense that it really is helpless. It really is hopeless, and we really are helpless.
Right.
And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And I think that if we have a concrete takeaway from this, it's that we make the effort to engage people who are not exactly on board with us, or we're not on board with them, and find what we have in common, and create civil discourse, and look for ways of pooling our strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. When I teach conflict management, that's one of the elements. Figure out what you have in common. You have more in common than is different. And if you can find that, that's a great starting point. So it's exactly right.
And in terms of our being able to affect change,
Mhm.
do we think, generally speaking, there is a high degree of trust in the integrity of the electoral system at this point?
Sure. Wait, what's the question?
I'll put it this way. Do we think a great number of people have faith in the voting system?
Yes,
Really?
You think they do?
I do.
Really?
Oh, I do. I do. I think the loudmouths, well, there's people who don't, and then there's people who are lying about it to
Yeah.
feed the people who don't. And they know they're lying, talk about ethical behavior. They know they're lying about it, and they are feeding a monster. But I think the vast majority of Americans believe in the electoral system and believe that it's safe. I think, unfortunately, you have these extremes that are taking up all the oxygen in the room on both sides. So that's on that side, they're talking a lot, and they're making it seem like it's pervasive, but
This is another situation in which I hope you're right, Diane.
listen, when you have Republicans certifying elections, when other Republicans are saying that's fixed, and their own party was coming out and saying, no, it's not. We've studied it. We've done all of these things. That's, that's where the truth lies. And they just keep showing and proving that the people who are saying it is rigged are lying, and they know they are, and they're being nailed. Look what happened to Fox News with Dominion. And now they have 2 more lawsuits, right? So I think that constituency is very small, and I think we have to be really careful about believing that it's really big, because I think that feeds there's nothing I can do about it.
I guess all I would say in response to that is people who argue against voter IDs are not inspiring my confidence.
Oh, yeah, I got to tell you, I don't understand arguing against voter IDs.
Yeah,
But
so let's not get too far to the weeds.
I know, right?
I agree
Sorry,
with you,
but
but let me wrap up with and I would recommend you go online and look for a series of videos called I believe it's Collective Illusions.
illusions.
It was one of the most fascinating short documentaries I've seen. And what really struck me was a study that was done in Germany, I believe, where they called people on the phone, random, and they said, take a coin, flip it, tell us whether it's heads or tails. If it's tails, you'll win a gift certificate, and if it's heads, you don't. And it's all in the honor system.
Wow.
So what would you expect would happen?
Everybody's got
Wow.
tails.
Yeah,
You would
everyone had
expect
tails.
everyone's got tails.
Miraculously, right?
Yeah.
It said slightly less than 50% reported tails,
Wow.
indicating that virtually everyone told the truth.
Wow.
Wow.
And yet when you ask people what do you think would happen in this situation? They all give the same answer. And they said that the danger in that is that when we start believing nobody's honest,
Yeah.
then we create a culture of dishonesty. It
Yeah.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Mm,
And so it was instructed to see that things aren't as bad as we think they are, but thinking they're bad can make them worse.
Yes.
The perception of bad is still bad, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
and I
Creates
also
that.
think that speaks to your point, Diane, about the polarization.
Yeah,
I mean, regardless of what side we're on, we're being told the other side is flat out wrong.
that's right.
Yeah.
And we're giving it air. We just need to stop giving it air and just,
Yep.
Yeah. And then in the comments, Leslie says repetition of lies creates beliefs, which is exactly what we're
Yep.
talking about.
yeah,
Yep.
There is this media and social media drum that you can't trust anyone. You can't trust the other side. They're all out.
That's
to
what
get
kind of
you.
makes me think, and while it may have been lesser degree when Tip O'Neill was there, that it goes back further because social media wasn't part of our world then.
Right.
So
right.
perhaps it wasn't as bad as now, but my sense is it goes back even further than that.
Back
No,
even
I think it
farther.
does, but at least it's the immediacy of it now.
Yep.
And the being able to hide behind
24/7. Yeah.
Yeah, and being
Yep.
able to
Yeah.
hide the
Yeah.
anonymity of being online and then no immediate consequences. You know, you would never talk to people the way these people would never talk to people face to face the way they do online. And
Some
that
of
just
them.
accelerate. Well, no, let's not all of them.
Becomes an accelerant, right, of self-interest. That's what the
Yeah,
social
yeah.
media becomes an
There's
accelerant of
consequences.
self-interest.
Yeah.
And that's all we
Right.
need, right? There's not enough of that around, right?
Yeah.
I love that phrase, Brian. Accelerant of self-interest. Wow.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly
a
what's
meme.
going on.
Mm.
You just come up with that, Brian, or you've had that already?
It just came to me.
I
But I mean, that's what it
promise.
feels like, right?
I promise you a footnote when I appropriate it.
No.
Yeah, maybe we'll make that the title of this episode. Speaking of which, we have run a little beyond our normal time, which is not a problem because it's been really a very stimulating conversation. We often do not come to any hard and fast actionable conclusions here. But I think that the bottom line for all of their discussions is we work to preserve our own integrity, our own civility. We work to not allow others to pull us down,
Mm.
and look for colleagues, collaborators, partners to stand strong in defense of integrity and ethics. And I believe that the three of you have definitely contributed to that.
Mhm.
I thank you. Diane Helbig, Brian Kelly, Mark O'Brien, a pleasure. For those of
Thank
you who are
you.
watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to jonasandgoldson.com. Submit it in the contact information there. If it's compelling, we'll definitely use it for a future episode. And until then, I'm trying out a new tagline: make ethics your North Star.
Oh, I like that.
Love that.
Yes.
So thank you all. Until next time, when we take up another topic to grapple with the gray.